the remaining topics here. So once again, let us observe and examine what are the remaining things, and let us move into the initiatives of the government and the measures taken up by the government in order to bring development of women. So yesterday we have been we have been studying about the approaches where the state need to take in order to bring the women into the development process and all. So when we look into these aspects here, so how far we are able to reach or how far we are able to involve the women into the development process, and how far the women issues have been addressed in an efficient and effective manner, and at the same time whether women is really occupying a moderate or at least occupying a respectable position in the society. And these are the things we need to examine today. So let us move into the topics, what the remaining topics we have, a brief understanding of the remaining topics. So I think now let us enter into what is called um, yeah, modernization and women development here. So we all know that modernization is a uh, process, a concept which is which really brought about the whole transition of the whole traditional Indian society into the modern era. And we know that the understanding of the modernization is something where it talks about adoption of the science approach, adoption of the rational outlook. At the same time, we come across what is called more economic growth and all. So thinking in a very broader manner and thinking in a rational outlook, going to understand, taking an understanding of all the happenings in the society in a rational thinking way. So this is exactly taking, or we started adopting the world's uh, highest values into the Indian society. So, in general, if we talk about this, modernization is not only the concept which we have adopted, but at the same time, the world countries went into the process of the modernization. So, almost all the world countries started transiting the traditional from the traditional to the modern era. So, what is the advantage of this modernization process? Whether it worked in an advantageous manner or whether it went in a negative aspect where women really did they open up themselves? Did they come onto the mainstream of the society? Did they enjoy the benefits of the policies and the programs taken up by the government? Let us please examine here. So usually modernity is understood as a common behavioral system where historically associated with urban and industrial, literate and participant societies in Western Europe. And at the same time, this system is characterized by rational and scientific worldview, growth and new increasing application of science and technology, together the continuous adaptation of the institutions of society to imperatives of the new worldview and emerging technological ethos. So here we actually, in order to understand the modernization, it talks about modernization is something associated with the urban and industrial areas and the literate and participation of the societies of the Western world countries. So here, when we talk about urban and industrial as well as the literate, so it's something where when you are adopting, the societies are adopting with the modernization process, you you are it is deemed that the societies are undergoing with the urbanization process, or society has to start up with the urbanization process, also industrial process. So when we take up this condition, or when we take up the adoption of the modernization into the Indian society, yes, India has also underwent drastic changes with regard to uh, the Indian traditional system and outlook of the common people towards the existing system. So this happened when we started with the industrialization process. So India also taken the rapid industrialization process. So we started establishing very rapidly, speedily the industrialization process. And then because usually when we look into the Indian scenario, the historical aspect of the Indian scenario, the traditional Indian system, we all know that we have been talking from the since the first topic and all. So because India is a patriarchal society, the major source of the income we draw from the agricultural system. So this was a major primary source of the economy for the people of the Indian society. So when we really wanted to take up modernization, we went with the industrial process. So we had a great shift from the shift, and also we can say we have totally lessened the pressure on the agriculture in the primary source, and we shifted that particular labor force or the people from this primary source or the primary activity, primary economic activity, to the secondary activity called industrial sector. So what is that, why we are talking about all these things when we are talking about the women issue here? It says that like something where we went with yes, even women had migrated to the, not initially but later on women also joined the industrial sectors, so where she could earn a better income compared to the agriculture. She could earn at least, she started learn taking up the skills to work in the industries, also in the other sectors of the society. So because of the urban process and the modernization process, we could experience with the other tertiary sectors in the urban areas, like the service sectors and different other professional sectors have come into it. Other professions have started arising in the urban areas. So all this really added up and it attracted the women force into all these sectors and all. So this has really improvised with the availability of the income source, availability of the employment opportunities, and the skilled working system in the urban areas. So this we can see that as some a sort of uh, achievement we could see and experience because of the modernization, urbanization, and the industrialization process. Yes, of course, this is as it says that modernization is also associated with the literacy. Yes, because we usually when we talk about Indian society, almost all the Asian countries which really experienced with the foreign rule and all. So we had also the British rule in the Indian society, which they could introduce the English education in the Indian society. With this, not only English education, but in order to take the Indian people into their own administration and to make them work here, they required the only the people who had that literacy. So because India and most of the we had the caste system here, and most of the downtrodden communities were ignored with all the privileges of education. So because of modernization, the outlook towards the education, the outlook towards the lower communities upgrading themselves, and the women especially upgrading themselves, and even they joined the labor force, and also they could educate themselves here. So this really, from a positive aspect, we can say that because of the modernization, this could achieved in the Indian society. Then uh, we talk about like as we know that the women have become the victims of development also. In what way we can understand that women, even though after modernization, women is still being the victim of the development aspect. So it says that it is more difficult for women to adopt the new conditions because family obligations make them less mobile than men. Their occupational choice is more narrow, limited by the customs. Usually they have less education and training, and even without these handicaps, they often face the sex discrimination in the recruitment. So even these are things still exist to some extent. We can say that mainly the mobility of the women from the household to take up the education or to take up the skill is still there are certain restrictions in the family system of the Indian society. And later on we come across like their occupational choice is very limited, very narrowed one. So any post she cannot go and join here, or it is quite a restricted one and limited one, narrowed as narrowed aspect of the employment we experience with the women entry up actually. And then we have the less, usually have less education and the training also. So any kind of training if you take up, or any skill training also, if occasional kind of training, or usually we may not allow the women to enter into all these trainings alone. So this is also very less training women actually have here in the Indian society. Then we come across the discrimination still exists in, even today when we talk about the present day also. The discrimination men women and discrimination of the boy girl still exists in the families of the Indian society. So this is I'm talking about in confining to the Indian society and the Indian family structures and all. So, the studies of the modernization, it says the studies of the impact of technology indicate that a decline in employment opportunities due to deepening capital intensity in the industrial sector and the female employment. Usually, this is true with the female employment. So, because there is very much extensive capital intensity is going on, the capitalistic system, and the more number of division of labor and all, this has been very negatively impact on the women entry into the industrial sector also. So usually they take up only the men who can perform the hardships, men who have that skill training and all. So where women lack all these things, and even this is a kind of hindrance you find with regard to the employment of women because of the development also. Then the structural changes in the economy also eliminated the female occupations. So when we look into the structural changes, so because of the modernization, the rapid changes which is occurring in the world communities, we find this the structural changes which are happening. Usually, it is opening up the new avenues and the new occupations here, which is also restricting and throwing the women from the economic fold and all. So where she can immediately cannot take up the entry or take up the job facilitations, employment facilities, and this is also one of the negative impact of, we can talk about the structural changes taking place in the economic system. Then the newly started industries, for example, now I said because of the modernization, urbanization, and the industrialization, there are new other uh, what is called the professions have started coming up, arising in the urban areas, and new other sectors have been coming up. So these sectors, like for example, if we take the industries being like inhospitable to women, and because of new ideology about men's and women's peers, and then again many of these industries are urban based and made it difficult for women to combine childcare and domestic work with paid work outside the home. So this is not possible because women had already the existing responsibility of the child rearing and the family responsibility and all. So urban industries cannot take up with the child rearing and cannot give that paid recruitment to these women who have already these existing responsibilities and all. Then urban employment calls for some level of education. So urban employment, women want to come down, migrate to the urban areas, join some force here, and this is actually demanding for some educational qualification from the women's side also. And we come across what is called long distance travel and long hours of absence from home. Usually, when she is joining the economic activity in urban area, she is absent in the family core and the family domestic person. So this absolutely there may be absent of any person who can take care of their kin and kin. So this is not accepted in the Indian families or any of the families in the societies here. So this is also making the lessening number of women joining the employment force in the urban area. The work organization changed form and content, but women's roles did not change. Though there is a structural change, the women role still remain the reproductive role, women role still remain the domestic core performances, women role still remains as the child rearing, child bearing, etc., and the family responsibility. So there is no change in these kind of structural changes of the women and their family here. Now, when we come across the trends in economic participation in the post-independence period. So all this is we have been experiencing after the industrialization, when we started the industrialization and the urbanization process in the Indian society. When we entered into the post-independence period of the post-independence period of the Indian society, we come across more. This is the trend in the economic aspect here. So, in which direction the employment source is taking place, in which direction the economic aspect is really running here. So, we come across unorganized sector. So, more number of unorganized sectors started evolving, and this is attracting more number of women to join into this kind of force. So you find the irregulated, the insecure, absence of the unionization, all these sectors started evolving in good number, very good number, higher number compared to the organized sector. And this is the much big sector which is taking the women employment in a higher number. And the gradual commercialization, modernization of the economy, efforts made by the government replaced traditional by modern institutions of credit and marketing to stabilize ownership of land and to maintain minimum wages. And no means succeeded in organizing the production relation or in controlling the degree of exploitation of the vehicle. So as we are saying that women is in more number, in a bigger number joining the unorganized sector, but then still you find that these sectors are also going through the modernization of the economy. The sectors are adopting the modernization process, and efforts were made by the government also to replace the traditional and modern institutions of credit system and marketing, the credit and the marketing to stabilize the ownership of the land. So now they are able to bring this land ownership in a very stable manner. The credit systems have opened up. They started giving loans to the marginal sections and the weaker sections of the community. But then still, though this is been taking place on one side, economic aspect here, but then still we find that the degree of exploitation of the women in these sectors have not changed. So there is no any kind of replacement with regard to the exploitation, any kind of changes you find in the exploiting the women employees in these sectors. So there is absolutely no changes of exploitation which is taking place in these sectors. So even either from the government side or from the organization side or from the industrial side here, we don't find even a single point of movement from the exploitation has taken place. So no, absolutely no change. So still exploitation is being continued in these sectors. Then services and professions, as I said, now because of the urbanization process, modernization process, the new sectors have come into existence. And for example, we have the services and the professions like it talks about the new professions and occupations where usually the presence of women in the public services and the jobs in the tertiary sector is now an accepted fact. So women into the public sector, women into the different other job sectors, and now society is accepting. So for example, the limited jobs, women are even preferred. Now, what are the jobs we usually have here? First of all, let us enter into the emergence of women in the non-traditional fields, employment of post-independence period. After the post-independence period, till now what I've been discussing was the traditional type of economic system, traditional type of role performance of the women. Now, after the post-independence period, we have been experiencing the different evolution of the different kind of service sectors and also the professions here. But what are these non-traditional fields, usually women of employment in the post-independence period? The constitutional guarantee of non-discrimination and equality of opportunity in matters of employment. So this is a right which has been uh, provided, it has been legalized by the government of India, where it says the constitutional guarantee. It has been imbibed by, included in the constitution, where it says that non-discrimination and equality of opportunity in the matters of employment. So this provision has been given to women also. The development of women's education and their entry into areas of education and employment hitherto not monopolized by men. So which usually development of women from education and their entry into the education which was monopolized earlier, but now it is open up to the women also. Now, increasing tendency among the urban educated women to take up paid employment which reflected the gradual ideological change in social values as well as the growing economic pressure on the urban middle class families. So because of maybe the urban communities culture, now people are accepting that women is entering into the other professions like which is paid employment, which is paid employment. Earlier we talked about non-paid employment of the women traditional aspect, but now here we are accepting that women are entering into the sectors and the professions which is paid employment and reflected the ideological changes. So now the thought process have changed even in the family system of the Indian society. So though it was a though even today it is a patriarchal, but still there is an ideological change and people are accepting with the families are accepting with the women entry into the paid employment today, because there is all the different other kind of value systems are growing up in the Indian society, and it is building up pressure on the middle class families. So middle class families are accepting even women's entry into the economic aspect and her contribution in the family, economic contribution in the family. So I said the middle class families here. Then the constitutional guarantee of equality of opportunity, non-discrimination on grounds of sex in employment, and the specific directive to promote with special care the educational and economic. So all the provisions started with the modernization, and because we have started our own policy making and all, so we adopted, as I said yesterday, we were taken the different approaches. We identified the loopholes in the policy making. We identified the invisibility of the we could examine the invisibility of the women labor activity, women's productive activity in the family and also in the society. So this now entered into the mainstream of the society. Now it is a central focus of the government developmental policy. So we have been addressing these issues by bringing these welfare programs to the women here. Now, what are the professions we have? Like in the modernization period, we thought about the new entry of the arising of the different professions like teaching profession, teachers. Women also joined the teacher profession here. And usually the reason why she's entering into this profession is it is an occupation, particularly in the school stage, and requires relatively little training beyond general education in comparison to the professions of medicine and other high professions. So comparing with the other professions which requires a good quality of education and a special kind of training and a special kind of qualification. So teaching profession is one where with little kind of educational level and little training, she can very immediately join the teaching profession. So this has been observed by more number of women in the private employment sector also, private teaching aspect here. Then we come across the second reason for why women are taking up teaching is preference of this profession is the respectability attached to the profession in society, and in spite of its lower salary structure, it gives women comparatively more time for household duties. Usually, when we talk about this, why the preference is taking women are taking preferably taking the teaching job and all. Usually, the dignity attached associated with the teaching is very high in the societies like Indian society. So not only India, but almost I think world countries, you find that teaching profession itself is considered as a dignified profession. So this is one tag given to the profession. Women are going into this, and families are accepting women into the teaching profession. Though it is a low paid income low paid income employment also, but then still she can give ample enough time for the family and her domestic course and all. So she's spending hardly around 7 hours in the school, or 7 to 8 hours in the school, and later on by, see for example, now when we talk about the Indian schools here, we have the timings from 8:40 or 8:30 to by 4 she can end up, or 3:30 she can end up, and she can come back home, and again she perform her domestic role and all. So this is the reason also where they feel that yes, she is able to do the domestic work, also bring the economic contribution to the family. So this is the second reason we have women in more number joining the teaching profession. Then the doctor profession, the medicinal profession, where women are has medicine has been accepted and respected profession for women also. Considerable period of the general tendency is say that women to concentrate in the practice of gynecology, and in recent years they have also entered, even when we take up the medicinal profession, medicine as a profession also, women entry is considered as a respectable profession. Becoming a doctor, women becoming a doctor is a respectable issue. But then still, even in this, there are different kind of branches of the medicine where she's actually takes up only the gynecological subject. So otherwise, the other subjects and other branches are being again dealt by men, and it has been occupied by men folk. But otherwise, you find that either as a uh, children's doctor or as a gynecology, more number of women you find in this kind of field. So this is also, there is an internal selective aspect in the medicinal profession also. So see how the selective way, the choice preferences are still pressurized on the women here, even in the modern society and development aspects. Now, nurses, regarding other categories of medical professions, we have the nursing profession. Even this has been more number, you find only the women joining as the profession of nurses, and the lawyers, and also the social workers. So most of the women now presently, you find women joining as a social workers also. Presently, sometimes it is either paid or non-paid. If we are entering into through the organization, sometimes organizations demands for voluntary service also. So this women may join to give also the voluntary services in the rural areas. Fine. Now, so likewise, we are talking about all these aspects in the modernity, and we talk about feminization of the poverty. So now the poverty, earlier in the traditional period, poverty is the issue of the families. Poverty is the issue of the family. So in general, we have the below poverty level people who usually could not afford to at least a minimum meal, minimum affording aspect for the family and all. They could not afford, or purchasing power is absent among the people here, and they cannot afford even a 2 meal day for the family. So this is usually related to the general family system. But now, as the development process is going on, we are taking and we are attaching the poverty to women itself. So feminization of the poverty is a new concept we hear in the development process. So what do we understand by the feminization of poverty? It says something where the growing perception of poverty and increasing female phenomena. So poverty is an area where the situation of women has taken dramatic change and for the worsen. And even given the fact that women are generally living longer and receiving less support from the families and husbands and the fathers, the number of rural women living in poverty has really doubled over the past 20 years. And poverty of women was identified as the critical areas of concern for the Fourth World Conference on Women. So now this is the new concept we have. Why? Because the support of the family is lacking for the women, and more it is the condition in the rural areas where there is absolutely no family support for the women, the men support in the family for the women, and she is entering into more poverty here. So now this is the concern of the conferences or the seminars conducted on the women subject here, and they're focusing on feminization of the poverty. Yeah. Then we come across, yes, technology for women. So now we have the appropriate technology for women. Yes, now because in the urbanization process, modernization process, because we are more now, almost all the countries, all the societies making utilization of the big technology or the new technology into all the different fields also. So this actually made the societies to take up or give the skill training or the technological training and the training in general to the women to enter into different economic spheres. So, for example, now we come across usually the educational field. So the expansion of much faster at the level of higher education. So women are into the higher education also. So in case of women, it is the urban middle class that avail both secondary and higher education. So in rural, there is more number of dropout for the girl child. So because girl child, if she is an elderly girl child, she has to take care of the family even today. Even today, I'm talking about the present day situation. Even today, she has to take care of the family and the other younger ones in the family if the both parents are attending the agricultural work and all. So she becomes a dropout from the school. So higher number of the school dropouts arise in the rural areas, wherein in the urban areas, coming to the urban, shifting to the urban areas, you find that middle class families have a greater attraction towards the education, and their families are sending the children into to the schools and the colleges also. So higher education is the example for the case studies of the middle class families in the urban areas. The work participation rate by educational level shows that while employment opportunities for educated women have increased, that of illiterate and semi-literate women have declined. So now, comparatively, because of all the policies, all the awareness which we really brought into the societies here, the media exposure, giving importance to women education and her productive role and all this made drastic changes in the societies. And now we find that illiterate and semi-literate have totally declined. The number of illiterate women and semi-literate women have totally declined, and women are in showing the number is showing that higher education and the a moderate education is been there for the women presently. Then the dilemmas of idleness among the educated women. Now we have, yes, the competition has taken place in a very large number. So women are sometimes becoming idle after even higher education also. And this is one idea where when this is one of the issues we need to address here. And women's, there is vocational and technical training. We have the number of vocational trainings taken up by the government to give the skill training to the women so that they can start up their own self-employment and need not depend on any other employment opportunities in the society or by the government here, either in the private or the public sector. So here we have the inadequacy of the vocational training opportunities for women and widens the productivity gap between men and women at all levels and makes them unwanted by the economy. So, but though the vocational trainings are there, it is not enough for the rising population. So here, comparatively, when we take up the training centers and the skill training, more number of like the IT, for example, now we have the what is called the IT sectors or some other sectors which give the training, vocational training to the boys itself, not the girls. Usually, the girl and the woman entry or taking up vocational training and vocational training centers are very less compared to men vocational centers in the Indian society, and women have lesser opportunities to take up the vocational training in the society, and this is making her drop down and not entering into the any economic sphere of the urban areas. So on job training, pre-employment training is there. So all this now is the new trend we find in the modern era. modern era and all. Now there are polytechnics to start an employment advisory service for the students here. Training schemes to improve earning capacity of women. Now we have the Central Social Welfare Board, which is a very important agency providing assistance for the programs and operated by voluntary organizations. And we have the training of development cadres under the insistence of various developmental agencies. We have the Indian Council for Child Welfare. So these many areas and different many subjects have been covered, different many issues have been taken up, and for every issue there arises a new commission, a new committee to form to look into all the grievances or look into the issues here. But then still number of all these have come into existence, number of all these have entered into the inquiry of all the issues, but then still there are issues which are related and which are really existing and still there, which is totally degenerating, or we can say uh, uh, it is like where we are still, it is affecting in a very greater manner the women folk in the society. For example, when we take up the case of the COVID period. So most of the COVID period, we could experience that there are number of domestic violence cases, and women of rural as well as the urban areas went to give the complaints in the FIR to put, lodge the complaint in the police station at that particular period. So this is one case study we can take where we can experience that yes, still even in the present day situation also, it we are talking about the domestic violence and the different other cases towards the women against the women and all. Now, uh, the new economic policies. Now, let us examine the different 5-year plans which went with bringing the women into development and giving her all the welfare activities. So, to talk about all the 5-year plans, we come across from the initiation of the 5-year plans, we have from the first 5-year plan, second 5-year plan, we took the Mahila Mandals we studied yesterday. So, we started organizing the Mahila Mandals at the grassroots level, and we also could see in the third and the fourth plan period the interim plans where it was in 1961-74. So it accorded higher priority to education of women and measures to improve maternal and child health services and supplementary feeding for children, nursing and expected mothers. So this subject was covered in the third and the fourth 5-year interim plans and all. Then again, we come across the National Plan of Action in 1976, which was a major outcome of this report, and it identified the following areas: the health, family planning, nutrition, education, employment, legislation, social welfare to formulate and implement action programs to raise the status of women. So, status of women was identified, and in order to raise the status of women, education, health condition of the women, health care of the women, family planning for the women, and at the same time nutritional aspect for the women, education and employment for the women. So these items were considered, these issues were considered as the major important focal at that particular point of time in 1976, and these were addressed at that time in the planning period. Then we have what is called the sixth 5-year plan in 1980-85. Very recently we talk about the landmark, which is the landmark in the history of women's development, which has recognized the developmental sectors and include a sixth plan document, a separate chapter for the first time in the history of development training planning, where it adopted a multidisciplinary approach with a which a three-pronged thrust on health, education, and at a time they could talk about, they could address health, education, and employment. And this is why which has been considered as a major milestone towards the development of the women. And Dwakra, so Dwakra group emerged at this period. So where we talk about was launched in 1982 as a subcomponent of integrated rural development program. So under this subject, we have included Dwakra as a subplan. So accordingly, we went, it is really dramatically, it changed the rural women drastically with the economic power, and it has really empowered the rural women by forming the groups and all and giving them the subsidies, loan facilitation, etc. etc. Right. Then we have the seventh 5-year plan, which talks about the developmental programs for women continued with the major objective and a significant step towards the direction economic and social status. into the mainstream of the developmental and beneficiary oriented programs was initiated in this period. In the seventh period, a beneficiary oriented programs for women in different developmental sectors. So beneficiary oriented programs started initiated in this particular period, and it got implemented at that period itself. Then in the eighth five-year plan we have in 1992 and 97, where it promised to ensure the benefits of development from different sectors and do not bypass women, and special programs implemented to complement the general development programs. And therefore, we have the benefits to women in three core sectors: education, health, and employment. So these sectors gave a greater benefits to women, and this was looked upon in this particular period of a plan period. Then, so likewise, we have been working with all the plan periods, and now we can say that yes, the women became a target group here, and we could able to bring some beneficiary activities, some beneficiary benefits. Also, very effectively, we worked. I mean, the government of India has worked with all kinds of issues, addressing the issues here, but again in the form of impact of plans, policies and programs in raising the status of women. Support of there is a step program called the Support to Training and Employment Project, launched in 1987, aims to upgrade the skills of poor and assetless women, mobilize, conscientize, and provide employment on a sustainable basis to women in the traditional sectors like agriculture, dairying, fisheries, sericulture, handlooms, handicrafts. So this was initiated a step. It is called STEP, STEP step. So support to training and employment project here. So this actually initiated to in 1987 in order to upgrade the skills of women, and especially the poor women, assetless women and the poor women here. And in order to mobilize them, sensitize them, and provide employment on a sustainable manner, where women traditional sectors as agriculture, dairying, and also fisheries, sericulture, and looms, handicrafts. So they got all the skill training in this particular period. So they have started this program in order to give the upgrade the skills of the women in these traditional professions and occupations and all. Then we have what is called a program which included gender sensitization, women in development, inputs and provision to support the services. So gender sensitization, sensitizing about the gender. So the importance of the gender and sensitizing about the gender status at this particular period through the step. Then training come employment come production centers, NORAD. It is called as NORAD, training come employment come production centers, where we have the second major program, training come employment come production centers, which commonly known as NORAD. Assisted training programs for women, extends financial assistance to public sector undertakings, corporations, autonomous bodies, voluntary organizations, and to train women in non-traditional trades, provide employment. So first period step is for the traditional professions, traditional occupations. They got the upgradation of the skill. The training could be given to the poor women and the assetless women. And the second program talks about, the NORAD talks about the non-traditional economic aspects, where women been given training, come employment, come assistance, come production here. Yes. So here, like for example, what are the non-traditional here? Electronics, electrical, and also assembly and manufacturing, computer programming, printing and binding, handloom, garment making, weaving and spinning, hotel management, fashion technology, beauty culture, tourism. So all this was a new concept we are hearing today in the present day modernized system, where the women were specially focused and targeted in order to be given all the trainings to enter into these kind of professions here. So whether it is starting up of a beauty parlor, the in electronic field, assembly and manufacturing of the electronic goods and all, and hotel management, weaving and spinning, the fashion technology, and also the tourism, bakery, confectionery items, office management, all this were joined after giving the training, and they could start give the support of employment. They could give the production aspect, marketing and production aspect. So this were joined by the women force presently in the modern society. Then we have socio-economic program. So socio acceptance. This is where socio-economic program implemented by the Central Social Welfare Board provide work and wage to needy women such as destitute women, widows, deserted, economically backward, and handicapped. So the third program talks about the work and wage. So it is something where Central Social Welfare Board has set up the SEP. It looks into the work and wage to the needy women, destitutes, also widows and deserted, economically backward and handicapped women. A special category women were taken under this program, and these women were entitled for the wage and the work. So work and the wage here. So here they have been assured with the work and assured with the wage income. So this is one program we have. So likewise, we have number of programs initiated by the government. Like we have the welfare and support services, hostels for working women. We have creches for the mothers and the children, working mother and the children. And we have integrated ICDS. So integrated child development services. This is wonderfully working even presently in the present day situation where women or Anganwadi centers have been opened, where women gets the nutritional food intake and the lactating mother also gets the boiled eggs and the milk and even the children. All this kind of things is been covered in the ICDS here, and the welfare of the women and the child is being taken care by this department ICDS, and schemes for adolescent girls. So all this like early childhood development of women and children in rural areas, Dwakra group, then gender sensitization, awareness generation. So on one side, we have number of programs in order to give women a respectable position, a decent development, and also let them be the part of the development of the whole society. So this is actually the motto behind bringing all these kind of programs here. Fine. Now, in the last, when we look into the other topics in the last year, we have the non-governmental organization, their intervention into the women development. Of course, a greater part of the activity is being handed over, taken over, or shouldered by the non-governmental organization, which their entry and their responsibility, their role played in the bringing development women awareness, consciousness among the women, training to the women in the rural areas, also in the urban areas, and giving them the general mass education and nutritional education and all the healthcare, sanitational education. All this is wonderfully taken up by the non-governmental organization. So their contribution towards bringing the women's development is really great, and it really requires a lot to the organization. Now we have the United Nations International Emergency, so international programs related to the women issues and addressing the women issues. So on the global platform, on the international platform also, the women issues have been addressed. So throughout the world. So we have WHO, Women, we have the World Health Organization, United Nations Children's Emergency Fund, and UNDP. Also the Catholic Relief Services. We have CIDA. So all the other international bodies we have who are really addressing the issues of the women, looking into the girl child education and also the other supporting services for the women and all. So we come across the legislative objectives. We have the women organizations, the bigger objectives of AIDWA. We have presently the AIDWA. We have All India Women's Conference, AIWC, to secure recognition for the inherent rights of every human being, to support the claim of every citizen to the right to enjoy basic rights. All this with the objectives of the All India Women's Organization. Then we come across the Indian Association for Women's Studies. So especially a research study is being taken up. There are different organizations, there are bodies and the commissions which are taking up the research on the women issues, very especially the women issues itself. So a special inquiry is being taken up in order to give the knowledge to the society by saying that yes, these are the loopholes we have, and let us address these issues in a different manner. Let us take up the policies in order to redress the grievances which are still related to the women and the women issues here. Yes. So these are the things we have in these books, and hope you all followed what we have been talking about. I think I went very speedily, but then still hope that you have got what in general the topic or the subject actually wants to give to you all. So this is all with regard to the contemporary issues of women in the present day situation. So generally, we talk about different many issues, and domestic violence is a major one we have, and atrocities on the women is still taking place even in the workplace, whether it is workplace or maybe in the general bigger society. Atrocities with regard to the sex discrimination in the family also. Then at the same time, domestic violence by the family members against the women. All this is today also we talk about all these issues in the modern day urban societies and the bigger cities also. So these are all the things we have now, and I think this is the last class we have for today. So I'll stop for today here, and you all can prepare well for the exams. So can take a look of the syllabus, and you can prepare in general here about all the topics and all. Thank you all for today. Thank you.